Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. You are listening and watching Rashkin Report Perspectives, and probably Silicon Curtain a little later. So, you know what? Welcome. Press like, hit subscribe, do all the things that polite people do in good company because this is good company. My name is Yuri Rashkin, and joining me as we do weekly for this podcast, Jonathan Fink, host of Silicon Curtain. Jonathan, hello over there across the pond, across the beautiful ocean. How's it going over there?
I'm across the beautiful ocean, and all good apart from the world on fire and all the other nonsense that we have to deal with. But apart from all of that, it's great. I'm also
So true.
out and about, as you can tell, so I don't have my normal network, normal equipment. It's all a little bit, so the signal's not going to be fantastic. But here we are. We're in central London.
Well, hello, Central London. Connecting to you from frozen Wisconsin tundra, that's the world we live in. Where I often give interviews from sitting in my car because that's where I happen to be, and it's wonderful that there's still internet. Although sometimes it seems the internet is better in Ukraine. You know what? Speaking of Ukraine. There's a really difficult situation happening right now, and the situation is going from bad to worse. And clearly, Putin is using this, and Trump is using this as leverage to get Zelensky to cave in as if it is possible. Because, in my opinion, if you change the train conductor, the train is still going to go the same direction. So it doesn't make any sense here to provide pressure, but this is the pressure on Ukrainian people. And so I think, every time now, I can't say I have a survivor's guilt because, I just here in America trying to survive in my Wisconsin. But it's, I think, something that we just need to at least probably begin by acknowledging.
I think we have to. And the big question in my mind is whether this is incidental to the direction they're on anyway, or is there some degree of coordination and collusion? Because, the US had withdrawn pretty much all funding, all replacements for Patriots and stuff were already tapering down towards the end of last year. And the intelligence apparently is being substituted out by the British and the French, I'm guessing, although Macron sort of, fairly blatantly said that it's being substituted out because either it's being withdrawn by the US or it's anticipated that it is going to be withdrawn by the US. So it's at this point, what is the US providing? It seems to be absolutely minimal and it's dwindling. The question then is, were the Patriots withdrawn purposefully in collusion with Russia, knowing that this winter campaign was going to happen? Or were they just withdrawn as part of what was happening anyway, with a conscious or unconscious understanding that this winter campaign was likely? This is the answer I don't have at this point. But what is absolutely clear is that the US is providing very, very little, and it made a situation like this almost inevitable. Because if you know what Putin's like, you know what he's going to do.
Yes, and I think that there is a component of timing to it that is seemingly undeniable. Because, I guess if to say that this was timed precisely for Davos is a little too precise, but to say that winter of 26 is likely to be cold and the aid from the United States, whatever is left from the previous administration, is going to be dripping out and done. And this administration is basically preparing Ukraine for going through one more winter to see if they will choose to surrender. That really seems to me like just trying to squeeze Ukraine from two sides. And I think it's very obvious. The people in Ukraine want to make sure that they're being seen, but not only are they, I think, being seen, but the threat is now being realized because, gosh, maybe we need to recast this podcast from the Russian threat to the American threat. I don't quite know anymore. But, that's where we are now, isn't it?
It feels like a pincer movement. And actually, this isn't just wild speculation, because clearly Trump's negotiating method has been to at some point, maybe behind the scenes, just on the Russians, and then, oh, no, 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 no. No, we're not going to do that. Okay, who can we put pressure on? Who do we think are the weak side? Well, it's Ukrainians. So this idea of trying to be the bad cop for the bad cop is not a new strategy. Essentially pushing the Russian agenda, squeezing Ukraine, putting them under physical and psychological pressure, as well as the threat of removal of resources and assistance. And there's also, at the background, people are going to say, okay, this is conspiratorial. But I think many Western allies and Ukraine at this point are thinking not that America will turn and provide us with kit, but what they're trying to prevent is the worst case scenario with Trump and the US openly siding with Russia, openly saying, well, we're done. So we're going to lift sanctions and we're going to start to help Russia to restock its finances.
I think that's something that this administration's been angling towards for the past year. It is remarkable to see how it can be responsive to market movements, to money. And when the idea of Greenland turned out to be an expensive one, not in terms of how much it's going to cost to buy it or occupy it or whatever, but in terms of collapse of markets and credibility of the United States, it's amazing how aware this administration is to those kinds of crises.
Well, let's say that it's not completely off the table. Again, I don't know really if Trump looks forward more than the markets and what's happening in the immediate reaction. So for the moment, he's seen an adverse reaction. At the moment, he's seen that the Europeans immediately mobilized, even if it was with token forces being sent. They immediately mobilized to say that this shall not pass. And I think behind the scenes, they must have articulated what may happen if it was triggered. So one, I think he has an aversion to bad headlines. He has an aversion to blood. Everything he's done so far has been pretty performative and sought to avoid American casualties. He seems allergic to that. So we should use that. The strike against Iran, no casualties. The strike or the extrication of Maduro, no casualties. It seems he's willing to sign up as long as there's no body bags, no bad headlines, no responsibility, no real blowback. It's all performative. So the minute they're saying to him, logistically, Greenland's going to be expensive, it's going to be tough, there's going to be economic blowback, and yeah, there might be quite a lot of American blood and body bags. So this is the way to get him, convince him that the cost is beyond what he's willing to tolerate.
To be fair, I don't know that he per se cares about human life when the last name is not Trump. Well,
no, he doesn't.
But
the
optics,
optics,
it was
the optics
interesting.
of it he cares about.
Right. But the optics, and I think his base doesn't want to praise the price. His base doesn't mind showing dominance, but his base doesn't want to go and serve in the front lines and put themselves in danger because his base is likely to find themselves in that position. But what's interesting to me is what happened with murder of Renee Good in Minneapolis. 37-year-old woman, a mother of three, shot in the face 3 or 4 times. Well, she was shot 4 times, I guess. There were 4 shots. One was in the face. And Trump expressed concern because her father is a Trump supporter. And, well, that's just a terrible thing to happen to a Trump supporter. So Trump feels that he hopes that his father can still support Trump after all of this that happened. That's what he literally said. So I think that I don't know what he has allergy to versus what his base has allergy to. But, I was asked in an interview recently, how far are we in the United States from Ku Klux Klan? And I thought, well, what's the difference? Because they both are masked, and you can't see exactly who they are, but they're white men. And interesting difference is that both seem to be concerned about protecting white women, but ICE is killing them. So I think that there's some really weird parallels that are popping up because of American history. In Russian, that there's an expression of stepping on the same rake. And every and this is the American rake is that kind of like, ooh, we got to protect women, for instance, whether they like it or not. And again, Russian expression, нравится, не нравится, терпи, красавица. This, whether you like it or not, we can do it the easy way or we can do it the hard way. We can take Greenland the easy way or we can remember you. It's always the same.
And yeah, to come back on that, I mean, when I say allergic to blood, I mean allergic to the optics of blood and the optics of his side accidentally being there, because I'm sure not only does he not care if brown or black people's blood is spilled. In fact, I think he takes a thrill in that. He takes a thrill in the adulation that that certain quarters will express when the people that they have othered get hurt. So I'm not saying he has any human empathy whatsoever.
That is a good point, because I think if he saw that it was only Democrats who were willing to fight, he'd be like, "This is great."
That's it, unfortunately, and that's why there's no one seems to be caring. Even if, say, and there's been many videos of this, someone says, "But I'm a Marine veteran," but clearly they are from Hispanic extraction or Asian or whatever, maybe not even that generation, but there clearly seems to be the empathy is no longer based on how you've served the country, but it's purely based on ethnicity. It's an extreme form of I would say sort of racism. There's two things I'm going to chuck back at you. One is there's this extraordinary Ukrainian meme where they've taken Trump's signature. Trump's signature has lots of little funny peaks in it, and they've just put little eyes into the peaks. And guess what? They look exactly like Ku Klux Klan silhouettes, like a whole crowd of Klansmen gathering. So you got to look that one up. That is quite something. The other one is he seems to quite naturally have adopted a very Russian negotiating tactic, which I am informed is also quite common in the fevered world of Manhattan real estate, not the wider kind of New York or New Jersey, whatever, it's Manhattan style. And that is to basically start with an absolutely maximalist position. You start with something totally unreasonable on the theory that whatever you land up on is something beyond what the person you're negotiating with was prepared to give. That is 100% the Russian playbook. It seems that it aligns very much with the culture of Manhattan real estate deals.
There's a couple of things to say there, because I think, yes, these are Russian rules, and you can say that Trump is Putin on steroids. But I think that the approach to nations like their pieces of real estate it's not working for Putin. So I don't think it's going to work for Trump, because he's putting people in situations where they can't agree. They can't just be like, "All right, we'll sell you the house and we'll just move to a different neighborhood, sir." It doesn't work like that. So, when
no, it doesn't work. And I wonder, I mean, I bounce this back to you. When we see Western outrage at what Trump does, I always have to ask myself, are they outraged at the tone and the manner, or are they outraged at the substance of it? Because when it comes to substance, let's face it, we have not done the right thing by Ukraine. So I think it's worth cutting through the criticism of Trump that is made. Is this on a principle point of view you're upset, or are you upset because he doesn't engage in the kind of performative hypocrisy that a lot of world diplomacy and politics runs on?
That's true. He doesn't engage in some of the performative diplomacy. He engages in performative bullying, which is a slightly different form of rhetoric. But there are certain ways of standing up to it. And we see that when different countries stand up to it, he folds. We now have term of taco and fafo, where we have countries that are, Trump is going to get scared and run away, whether it's Brazil or China or Russia, there's several examples. Or maybe it's going to be like Fafo, fuck around, find out, and that's where we get Venezuela. And where if you're weak, or brown, then things could happen to you. So I think that this administration is combining the combination of bad instincts from different areas of human endeavors, from business, from human relations, from geopolitics, everything there. But that's what they do. They always go in the worst possible direction until they run into a problem. Then they announce a framework of a plan, and now it's a victory for Trump again. Wow, miracle of miracles.
And this is where I think my real estate analogy breaks down a little bit, which is that Trump also has characteristics of the gangster. And this whole Greenland thing and the implied threats, I think, go far beyond a business deal, even the most crooked business deal, and enter into a kind of gangster type, as they say in Russian, krysha, or protection racket. And the implication here, and Bessent and others are sort of echoing it in quite a shameless way, which is, nice country you got there, shame if something bad happened to it.
It is. But what I'm trying to figure out, Jonathan, I lived in Utah when I first came to the United States. And in Utah, there was the amazing team called Utah Jazz. What does jazz have anything to do with Utah? Well, because the team used to be in New Orleans. And then they know jazz. And there's two players, John Stockton and Karl Malone, who had this pick and roll setup going on that was so obvious, and it worked year after year, exactly how it was executed. Everybody knew it was coming. They were going to do it, and then they did it. And the only thing that changed is, I think, A, they retired, they got older, and two, I think some of the players got bigger and faster, and the game kind of developed beyond. But how are we going to stop this pick and roll here,
Well, this is it. I think Mark Rutte has come in for a lot of criticism, which is that actually, and this is I've heard this from several people who are contingent, who have an understanding of Trump, including Anthony Scaramucci, who I rather like listening to, even if I disagree vehemently with some of what he says. But what he says about Trump is, look, you get him wrong. Trump does not hate people necessarily who stand up to him. He has some respect for strength, and he will attack you, and he will do various things, but actually he will have some respect, and you're more likely to be able to get your argument across if you demonstrate strength. If you demonstrate craven weakness and appeasement, and you take a kind of negotiating tack based on appeasement, which Mark Rutte is doing, you are going to get rolled over. He has zero respect for that kind of approach. Again, that exactly figures with how Putin understands the world. The only way to deal with him is to show strength, action, determination, and to demonstrably show how you're going to resist. Not that he'll stop attacking you, but he'll say, okay, we've got some resistance on that direction. Right, we're going to try something else. Or we're going to try another victim, which is less willing to put up. This is a classic bullying mentality. And it seems that many in Europe have not quite learned how Trump operates, and have certainly not, after all these years, learned how Putin operates either.
What do you people do with bullies?
Well, as explained to me by many Ukrainians, is you deal with them as you would deal with a gopnik, on the streets of Odessa or wherever. You punch them in the face until they fuck off. It's the only way to deal with them.
See, I will. May I offer a middle way for Davos, exclusively for Davos? In my experience, when I used to serve on Janesville City Council, Janesville, Rock County, or Wisconsin, where I live, and we have an annual dinner for all the businesses, Chamber of Commerce dinner. And it was happening one year when I was on the council, when we had a governor who was just started mass protests around the state. His name was Scott Walker. Became famous, didn't end up being a presidential candidate very well. Like, he failed very quickly at that. But he really pissed off a lot of people. And when he was invited to be the guest of honor, the speaker at this Chamber of Commerce dinner, and we were there as city council. A lot of people were there, and there was twice as many people outside as there were in the building, because the protests were so huge. It was anti-union, and a lot of Wisconsin has a very strong, proud union history, and so I came over there, and I listened, and I kind of supported all the local businesses. And when Scott Walker came up to speak, I thought to myself, I just can't. I can't sit here and listen to this self-aggrandizing crap and all the self-serving lies that he's going to level at us, because I know what it's going to be and I don't want to deal with it. And I got up and walked out. And outside there were again twice as many people, and it was kind of, I was welcomed. People like, wow, this is so cool, you know. And then what happened, actually, there was an after story to this, because the next day I got an email from another city council member saying, you know, you surely couldn't have been dumb enough to do this, because, you know, you're just, you know, all these horrible people out there and you're supporting the protesters. And it insulted me, what I felt like. And I said, you know, you have 5 minutes to apologize, or I'm going to make this letter, which is public record, public. I gave him 10 minutes. He didn't apologize. And I published the email where he insulted everybody who came out to protest. And the silly thing is that I was not running for re-election, but he was. And the election was shortly after, and he lost. And then he blamed me. I said, no, 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 you did it to yourself. So I think with Trump, it's important to just walk out instead of standing there and just be like, oh my God, this is better, you know, because this is like Stalin in a way, where the first one to stop clapping gets executed. We're ways from that. I'm being a little extreme here, but the idea of worshiping the speaker and just don't want to get into trouble, that's what Carney was talking about in his speech. But I think that's where it starts, is just walking out and not giving this attention monger attention.
And if you are going to stay in the room, do something demonstrative. When he says something despicable and disgusting, which he did about Greenland, once again, and where he said about Denmark, if he says something despicable, you stand up and you boo. You quite literally go and you demonstrate.
That's your British Parliament speaking, isn't it?
Yeah, I would do that. If anyone ever allowed me into the room, which is one of the reasons they never will, I couldn't contain it. I would literally, there's no way this is going to pass.
But that's the difference. I was a, responsible member of city council. I couldn't do this, show the city in a bad light. I didn't want to do that. So I just got up and walked out. But it has to start somewhere. The other thing that's been interesting to watch, kind of as a side note, is how different people are responding to Trump. Michael Cohen being one of the interesting characters who has recently changed his stripes again. And apparently betrayal is the key component of Michael Cohen. And Lev Parnas, who is a guest on Rashkin Report from time to time, kind of straightened him out quite severely. And Lev Parnas is going to be a guest on my channel on Friday. So I'm excited because we're going to kind of take apart the accusations. And we have a Russian-speaking vlogger who decided to get into this again. There's disinformation for people who speak English. You may not realize to what extent the water is polluted in every language. Because
so what's happened? Could you pick that apart? Because I saw the announcement on Midas Touch that they were no longer going to be syndicating, various formats they did with Michael Cohen. What's he done? What's the nature of his double flip, as it were?
I will let Lev explain this more succinctly, but my general understanding is that Michael Cohen found himself in a difficult situation, being not just on the outs with Trump, but really being the reason that Trump has been found to be a felon. And so now he is getting idea out there again. I will let Lev speak more on it, but that he considers that it's prosecutors' fault that they pushed him and got him in this position where he said all these terrible things about president. Oh, So now he is like, he was manipulated, he was pushed around. This was not, this just happened to him because he's a little baby that had no idea how, who he was working for. Or then, I mean, it's just, this is not politics, this is personal for Michael Cohen. And there are a couple of examples. There's one example in Russian language where there's a social media influencer who was regular guest of mine prior to the election, but once Trump got elected, she kind of changed her stripes. And in her situation, I can understand it because, as in Michael Cohen's, as in Nicki Minaj, and all these influencers that seem to have flipped the different direction, is they seem to have some kind of a pressure point on them from government. And sometimes it's, a relative that's in trouble, sometimes it's their own, but people are vulnerable. And I think, again, in that situation, better thing to do is just to shut your mouth. If you can't be honest, if you feel pressure, don't sell out, just be quiet. And I hope we can, I hope that should that moment come, that I will choose to just shut off my YouTube versus be like, Trump's really great. I don't know what I was thinking. Well,
Yeah, what was I on? There's something in the water, And that Kennedy guy, really, he's the best.
Yeah, so we have these, and so in this world of Trump, that everybody has to find, again, like, it's not just saying pretty things, it's doing things. When we see, there was a story I saw about a bishop in New Hampshire who is saying that he's getting his people to, like, get their affairs in order because this could be the time of martyrdom. When we see what's going on in the United States, and when we hear our president speak on the world stage, it's very unnerving for a lot of different people, because it's so obvious, because it's this pick and roll that is just keeps on happening over and over, where he seems to have attorney general that is just rushing to do his bidding. We're actually, right now, there's a Jack Smith giving testimony in Congress, which I think is historically extremely important, because we know there's probably not going to be a trial, at least under this administration. So perhaps this is the best opportunity to get some information out about what was happening. But I think that Americans know enough. I don't know if this is about, we don't have elections coming up as far as deciding on Trump. We have our opinion made up. If you thought that he wasn't hiding documents, this is not going to change your mind. If but I think still truth matters, and saying things, it's important. So we'll see. And I don't think Jack Smith is going to flip. I don't think he's going to be like, this Donald Trump, man, he's a really great guy.
And Gavin Newsom, and there are several others who just are too deep in their criticism to flip, and indeed seem to have some kind of anchoring in values. The other thing, of course, is that with all the Greenland stuff, whether he's going to invade or not, and now it seems the balance is towards not, and that's simply because there's new evidence, as far as he's concerned, of what the cost of that would be. It has, however, driven Epstein off the headlines, and it has driven the energy situation in Ukraine off the headlines. Two absolutely critical stories which should be front and center.
Yes, and this is where Trumpeth has giveth us the neweth all the timeth. It's nonstop. If we're not going to be speaking about that crisis, we're going to be speaking about the investigation against Jerome Powell, and possibly the end of independent financial Federal Reserve in the United States, or about what's happening in Minnesota and the 1,500 troopers, or and then there's, of course, Greenland and Venezuela. He he gives us a lot to discuss, and it's I think it's the clarity that Trump provides, which I guess I can appreciate, because instead of people, again, making pronouncements, this is what Zelensky's speech was about, in a way, because saying, saying good words is good. Yes, we're for Ukraine. That's great. Where's the action? This is my favorite quote from Joe Biden. Don't tell me what's important to you. Show me your budget. This is where it comes down to proof. And if NATO is going to be an organization that's going to be just making threats, making pronouncements, arguing with each other, then it's not going to not just going to keep Putin at bay, but it's not going to satisfy security needs of the member states, who I feel like are concerned, even if Trump is now just trying to squeeze Europe and Ukraine together, which, by the way, is a good thing, because, hey, now Ukraine is clearly part of Europe. Maybe Europe is part of Ukraine. I don't know. But it's a important moment of clarity that we have reached, where even Donald Trump realized something, like he can't have Greenland. So wow, all the things we're seeing now. But of course, tomorrow he might say, and while nobody is looking, I think I'm gonna annex Greenland, or Iceland, or who knows. I mean, he's looking at a map, Jonathan. It's another thing that's emerging to me clearly. He has a thing with maps. And unlike Ben Hodges, who has like a map with him all the time and then shows Ukraine on it and all that stuff, this guy, I think, is building a Monopoly map. I don't know if he picked it up, together with his Burger King crown, but he is building something over there that's supposed to match in color and doesn't make any sense other than if you look at a globe.
And of course, given that it's highly performative, that's where the way out might be. Because as we know, the small population on Greenland lives on a very tiny sliver of that territory. So the way out might eventually be let things calm down and then say, okay, the place where the US bases and the abandoned bases, well, how about we have some kind of joint ownership, or we write a form of words where you can go around and say that those territories which contain US bases are ceded to the US. And you can go and claim that, yes, we now own a piece of Greenland. The fact is that the penguin population will be 1,000 times higher than the human population, and part of it will be buried under 2 kilometers of ice. But that's fine. He doesn't care. It's an abstract on a map.
It is, and his Gaza panel of peace is getting really quite a hilarious response in Ukraine. Although nothing beats the what Maria Machado did, where she presented Trump with her Nobel Peace Prize, and that just blew up Ukrainian, at least, internet, with all the memes of all the people giving their valuables.
Oh, the memes of that. My favorite is the Harry Potter one, handing over the Triwizard Cup. Fantastic.
Right. We here tend to like the squirrel handing over his nut, which is also a classic.
That is my favorite. That's my favorite. Yeah, that is my favorite. Harry Potter's number 2. Coming number 3 is Karate Kid giving his,
Right. Leonardo DiCaprio giving his door, to Trump. Of course, the door didn't help, but, that's all he had. So this is where we see, where comedy is entering things, and also AI. I went for a couple of seconds on Twitter. I was just kind of shocked by how much AI content there is, and everybody's just trying to demonstrate their picture of the world, and its reality is becoming up for grabs. And it's just like the extent to which we can pick reality and how it will look. It's not just for movies anymore. It's on your phone.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent there, because actually I think it does have an impact on what we're doing. There are a lot of creators in our space who've quite clearly flipped to using AI in a fairly poorly considered fashion to script. Now, I think it's brilliant for research if you're informed. It's brilliant for doing some of the dog's body work in creating scripts and doing research for interviews. And it's you can't automate, but it's a way of doing research at scale. And then you need to add some intelligence and hard graft in there to get something that feels organic and isn't chock full of nonsense. But it seems that many people have given themselves over to it. And my speciality in my profession prior to this is a form of semantic analysis, is breaking language down into patterns and components, which is why it's quite useful in looking at propaganda as well. And unfortunately, there are many people in the activist space. There are many historians, politicians. There are many think tank people who quite clearly are now drafting their pieces in LinkedIn and other platforms using AI. in a relatively uncritical fashion. It's just that the patterns of it are so obvious that, for me at least, is starting to lose all authenticity, even if it doesn't have, glaring inaccuracies.
That is such a amazing feature of how society slides into idiocracy, because it is total. People use AI. I'm sure Zelensky ran his speech through Chat GPT to soften some of the corners or whatever, because it was a good speech. And it really didn't hurt anybody too much. It was just perfectly enough, like it was AI checked. And why shouldn't it? There's a lot at stake. And for
That's
me,
fine. That's
and
probably better than a copy editor. Using it for that function is probably better than a junior copy editor. That's great. But you're using it in a very considered fashion rather than just letting it take over your voice, letting it take over your mind. And many people seem to convince themselves that the thing the machine produced reflects their intelligence and knowledge, when in fact, their brain has really had no role in crafting it.
that is, I think, it's a challenge for all of us. For my part, I know how much I've been relying on AI in the last few months, in terms of presenting information for my audience, because one of the valuable things that I can do is I can take a video and I can take a transcript and run it through AI and get some main bullet points out and get some key things, and it becomes a valuable thing that I can offer to my audience, that text that I read. But then I listen to it and I go, "Ooh, I need to cut that out. That's going too far." And then so you end up being an editor on it yourself, and you take responsibility
Yes,
for the end
you have
result.
to. You have to. Yeah.
But
Or it
that
just
is
comes out like hollow language, which sounds impressive, but then when you look at it, you go, that actually means bugger all. But it sounds impressive. And then you realize that actually a lot of people are reading texts without actually deconstructing the meaning of them. Let's relate this back to propaganda, because I think
But
this is a
then,
dangerous.
just to interrupt you, but to add a little point to this, I heard Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. They were filming a new series, and they were told that they should mention the plot and things several times, because people are kind of watching things on their phone and something else, and so it's not a bad thing to restate. I mean, that's the world we live in. We're just like, we're adapting to technology. Technology is adapting to us. And, but there's still, I think in the end, there's going to be special appreciation for human made product. Like, ooh, that's made by human. Nice.
But I think there's a dangerous inflection here, which is not really being discussed. And that is that the power of AI, I have seen it, is actually the adaptation of core materials into different voices. So if you take this dynamic, you've got two converging things. One is that AI can produce propaganda at scale. It can adapt its tone, it can adapt its themes to micro audiences. That's a coffee noise in the background. It can adapt.
Press like and subscribe. Yes, as soon as the coffee is ready, we shall continue. But this is an important opportunity to remind everyone.
There we
go. Go ahead.
The frothy froth noise. People running away listening to this is going to make themselves a coffee.
Okay.
Yeah. So the challenge is that I think the tendency is that propaganda is going to be fed into multiple tones and voices produced at scale. The tendency will be to make propaganda feel more authentic, unfortunately, and increase its reach. At the same time, it's going to make the truth feel less authentic. This is a real dangerous inflection point.
I feel like I would fine tune that point by saying that what I'm reading and what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing is that AI is better at tagging at emotions than humans are. AI is more direct, more powerful, because it has a goal. It will just go there. And so that's where, if you one of the advices I've read was that if a video really makes you angry, it's probably not human, it's probably AI, because they're just really pressing our buttons. And I think on that level, maybe looking for something that, like Rashkin Report or Silicon Curtain, is going to provide some reasoned approach and is not going to be like, run, burn now. Then maybe there's going to be a demand for that, because in this world on fire, calm voices, reasoned voices are going to be a little bit in demand.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for that sort of shock denouement where during one of our live streams, you suddenly sort of go like Arnold Schwarzenegger and your head deconstructs, and we realized that all along Yuri wasn't Yuri. He's being operated by some little alien, like in.
I'm at some point I was fascinated with the idea of Elon Musk or whoever was implanting the idea of technology in our brains and us fusing it. I mean, we have, so many of us have had surgeries that have, our bionic arms, joints, whatever. It is a matter of time, and I think when people become one with technology, this kind of a Borg that we're going for those that understand a Star Trek reference, when it's the goal to assimilate, is how is that going to all work out and play out? And how I think we're just entering a very interesting world in terms of our understanding of what truth is, what authenticity is. What do all of these things mean to us? I mean, again, to go back to Chamber of Commerce, they would say, oh, people say we want to support local business, but what is local business? Is it a business that works here, that employs people here, that spends money here? Like, how do you define local? So I think that kind of, again, thinking for ourselves, critical thinking is going to be so much more important, I feel, than some of the technical skills for which we're most likely going to have technology addressing better than we can. But at least understanding, and maybe that's where disconnecting from technology and understanding what reality is. This is what was said by Governor of State of Utah after Charlie Kirk assassination. He said, "Turn off your social media, go touch grass." That kind of a connect that we might be needing. But with this Trump, where we live from one announcement to the other, and it all feels dangerous and threatening, and people discuss how they're feeling. It's this feeling of dread and just that affects everything. That's going to have economic impact. That's going to have all sorts of impacts. And I look at 2026 and I wonder, is this going to be like 1937? Is it going to be like 1939, 33? Because it feels like we're kind of in our 30s there. Although maybe these are just the roaring 20s yet, and crash is still ahead.
Or we're in 1941 and we haven't really noticed. That was one of my guests actually the other day said, no, we're already in 1940. It's just that Ukraine is fighting as Britain did on its own. And that's what may merge later into whatever happens next. I mean, I wanted to throw a fun one in there, but it's not fun at all. It's deeply disturbing. I like this idea of local, because one of the big problems we've got, I think, is the rise of oligarchy. They're the ones resisting putting any guardrails in place. They're the ones resisting legislation around this new media, and indeed, via our politicians, resisting the idea of educating people to be more critical of their digital media. So I think it's the rising power of oligarchy, the lack of local responsibility or accountability for decisions, technologies, services is the only way to fix this, is local, make things local and tangible. But someone, I think it was Jake Bro, this is a video I'm putting out later this evening, we're talking about Peter Thiel, and I asked why are Musk and Thiel and these guys that are in the vanguard of a lot of the chaos that's happening, that's not in the interests of the broad mass, but is in their perceived commercial interests, why are they obsessed with Lord of the Rings? Because they don't really seem to have really read it properly. And Jake told me something that just stunned me, which I didn't know. You may know this. Palantir. Do you know the origin of the name Palantir?
It's it's from Lord of the Rings. It's yes.
It's Saruman. It's the all-seeing eye that corrupts Saruman. Just like, this is the bad guy telling you exactly what they want to build here.
It's that, or it's the quote from Mikhail Bulgakov that the greatest trick that the devil has accomplished is to convince the world that he didn't exist. Because we are surrounded by we have these kind of two competing realities of people who want to live by strength and people who want to live by law and order and rules based order instead of strength based order. And yes, everybody wants to just have their children raised in safety and all that good jazz, but the means that we seem to be willing to get there are very different.
Yeah.
And I think that this liberal America and liberal world needs to come to terms and understand who we're dealing with and the danger that is presented, but also the strength that Europe has. Because I mean, yes, territorially, you're pretty small over there. Like you could, I don't know, probably all fit in Texas, but there's a lot of money. There's a lot of brains. There's a lot of smart people, committed people, like you should be able to do this. I like how Alexander Stubb who just pointed out that Europe has more than enough resources to defeat Russia, especially in my humble opinion. I'm sure you would agree after what Ukraine has been doing to Russia for the last 4 years practically. Russia is
Yes.
much weaker now than it was 4 years ago.
It is this idea that somehow we are Russia's sphere of influence. No, the logic should be flipped, and we should put our energy behind it, which is that Russia is in our sphere of influence, not the other way around, and that needs to be impressed upon them. But it also reminds me of another film quote, and this is Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino in The Devil's Advocate, combined with there's never been a mashup of this, but combined with that dinosaur movie of Spielberg. It's when Jeff Goldblum says that life will find a way, but unfortunately evil will find a way. In the same way that you get the character at the end of Devil's Advocate, okay, that strategy that you saw unfold throughout the movie, that didn't work. We flip it. We find another way. We find another way to keep going, to erode you and destroy you. So I think if we are fighting Russia tactically, we will always lose because they will just pivot to trying to find another chink in our armor, another weakness. So what we have to do is to fight them with values and certainty and strength, and we have to proactively ask ourselves what are those chinks in our armor and make sure that they are not substantial enough to let the devil through.
It's interesting. I wonder almost if this is all about Hollywood, and you know where I'm going with this one anyway, because we've been fed this idea that it's all going to end well, that in the end there's going to be a happy ending, the cavalry comes over the horizon, and yay, curtain down, everybody go home, life is good. But there is also, like, I was thinking a genre of movies that were made in the Soviet Union about after war, like because sometimes you're in the middle of war and you have to kind of imagine the world being that we have won. And because we are in it, this is where art can express our values, because that's what you were speaking about, Jonathan. I agree. I just feel like we've got a lot of these Hollywood values that are things are absolutely, definitely going to work out great within the time that I have before my popcorn runs out. And if it and it doesn't quite happen this way, but values means that we're going to be victorious because there's no other option. And I think that maybe there's some movies will be made about that. Who knows?
Doesn't always work out that way. There's a Sergio Leone film, which I can't remember the name of it, but or it could have been him. Probably it was him. It's got I think it's either Paul Newman or one of these characters in it. Other people will correct us in the comments, but essentially, it gets to that point where the bad guys are running into town. It's not that one. No, it's another one where the bad guys have come into town. You realize that the good guys really are on their last legs, and but they're going to turn it around. They're going to turn it around. They're going to turn it around. No, the bad guys come in and they shoot all the good people, and then ride off into the sunset with the loot. And you're like, oh, whoops. we have to be aware in real life that can happen as
We
well.
have to be aware of that, but we also have to be aware that what we see on our screens isn't necessarily the only version of reality. Hollywood isn't the only version of reality. Fox News isn't the only version of reality. TikTok isn't the only version of reality. And so I think that's the lesson that we need to learn, because in the end, we determine what reality is. Because if Europe decides that they're going to stand up, that they're going to make Russia their sphere of influence by supporting Ukraine, then that's going to be reality. And and damn be TikTok.
This is it. Well, I think in our next one we should unpack more. Now that Davos will be out of the way, Greenland would hopefully have died down a little bit or transmuted into something that is almost. I don't think it'll be ever rational, but it'll move on to a plane where we're further down the negotiation. We need to turn back to, I think, ICE. What this is laddering up to in the US. Is this going to be an attempt to suppress the vote, cancel the vote, suspend the vote, or is this just a way of distracting us while Trump fills his pockets, loots the country, in the realization that he's not going to get a third term and he just needs to keep us all busy shouting at the screen while he's doing this thing over here, to line his pockets? And in this episode, at least, this peace board, I mean, this is beyond ludicrous. Did he think it was going to be something more than that? Is this just a massive shakedown? Or again, is it just another massive effort to distract and basically troll the world while he's busy lining his pockets and looting the system?
All the while praising Putin and blaming allies and democracies and being complimentary only of the great powers. This is the president that we have, and this is the policy that we have, and all of it could be true. But this is why you hit like and subscribe. Jonathan, thank you so much to you for your time, for your energy, and get a cup of coffee, for crying out loud. I mean, all this noise, I bet the coffee is pretty good.
I heard all the frothing noises, and it's got chocolate on the top and little biscuits, on the saucer. It's proper stuff.
You're listening and watching Rashkin Report and Silicon Curtain. Take care.